My friend Ben just replaced every solid door in his house with glass. Not for the aesthetic, but because he's terrified of who or what might be standing on the other side, talking to him in his own voice. He learned the hard way that in the Catskill Mountains, the thing knocking at your door doesn't want to come in. It wants to replace you. Ben is a technical writer. He deals in cold, hard logic. He's the last person on Earth to believe in skinwalkers. But after 48 hours at Blackwood Cabin, logic wasn't enough to save him. He thought he was being pranked when he heard his own secret knock at 1 a.m. He thought it was a recording when a voice that sounded exactly like his asked to be let in. But when he saw the thing wearing his favorite flannel shirt with a face that looked like an unfinished slab of clay, he realized the woods aren't just empty trees. They are a mirror. And if you stay long enough, the mirror starts to walk on its own. I'm telling this story because Ben won't. We've been friends since college, and he's the most grounded, cynical guy I know. He's a freelance technical writer, someone who deals in facts, logic, and manuals. He's not prone to exaggeration, and he certainly doesn't believe in the supernatural. But since October of 2024, something in him has broken. He won't even go into his own backyard after dark anymore, and he's replaced all the interior doors in his house with glass ones. It started when Ben rented a cabin in a remote part of the Catskill Mountains in New York. He was working on a massive project and needed a week of deep work away from the distractions of the city. The place was isolated, miles from the nearest paved road, sitting at the end of a long, winding gravel driveway known locally as Gray Rock Road. The cabin was beautiful in a rugged way: old timber, heavy stone, and large windows that looked out into a forest so thick that even at noon the ground was draped in shadows. The owner was a local man named Mr. Miller. He was a quiet, weathered man who looked like he'd been carved out of the very trees that surrounded the property. When he handed Ben the keys on that Monday afternoon, he didn't give him the usual tour of the amenities. He didn't talk about the Wi-Fi or the heating. He just stood on the porch, his eyes fixed on the tree line, and said one thing in a voice that was as dry as dead leaves. "The mountain has a long memory, son. People from the city like to think the woods are empty, but they aren't. If you hear a knock after the sun goes down, don't ask who's there. Don't go to the window. Just wait. If they don't speak by the third knock, you keep that door barred until the sun comes up. No matter what you hear, you stay inside." Ben nodded and smiled, thinking it was just a bit of local flavor, one of those stories locals tell to make the rental feel authentic or spooky for tourists. He thanked Miller, unpacked his gear, and set up his workstation by the large window. For the first few hours, it was perfect. The air was crisp, the smell of pine was overwhelming, and the silence was absolute. The first day was incredibly productive. Ben worked late into the evening, fueled by coffee and the rhythmic tapping of his keyboard. By 10 p.m., the forest outside had turned into a wall of solid black. It wasn't a peaceful silence anymore. It felt heavy, as if the woods were leaning in, listening. Around midnight, Ben was finishing a difficult chapter when he heard it. Knock, knock, knock. 3 sharp, deliberate raps on the heavy oak front door. Ben froze. He looked at his watch, then back at the door. He wasn't expecting anyone, and he was miles from the nearest neighbor. He thought maybe it was Miller coming back to check on something, but why would he arrive at midnight? Ben walked to the door and looked through the small brass peephole. The porch light, which he had left on, was out. The darkness on the other side was so thick it felt physical. He couldn't see a shape, a shadow, or even the railing of the porch. Remembering Miller's warning and feeling a sudden irrational surge of fear, Ben didn't ask who's there. He just stood there, holding his breath. Then came a sound that made the hair on his neck stand up. A slow, wet sliding sound against the wood of the door, as if something damp was being dragged across the surface. This was followed by a heavy, rattling exhale. It didn't sound like an animal. It sounded like a person trying to breathe through a throat full of fluid. It was inches away from his face, separated only by 2 inches of oak. Ben didn't move. He didn't speak. He retreated to the kitchen, grabbed the largest knife he could find, and sat on the floor with his back against the refrigerator until the sun finally rose. The next morning, the forest looked normal again. Ben checked the porch. The porch bulb hadn't burned out. It had been unscrewed just enough to break the connection. There were no footprints in the gravel, but the front door was covered in faint, greasy streaks, like something with oily skin had been rubbing against it. Ben tried to convince himself it was a bear, or perhaps a local teenager pulling a prank. He was a logical man, and logic demanded a rational explanation. To prove to himself that he wasn't losing his mind, he set up his laptop on the dining table, facing the front door, and kept his phone's camera ready. He told himself he would record the prankster and call the police in the morning. At 1:15 a.m., the knocking returned. But this time, it wasn't a heavy rhythmic knock. It was a soft, playful rhythm, the exact 4-beat pattern Ben uses when he knocks on my apartment door back in the city. A secret knock only he and I know. Ben felt the blood drain from his face. His heart began to hammer against his ribs. Then a voice came through the wood. "Ben? Hey man, it's cold out here. Let me in." Ben stopped breathing. It was his own voice. It wasn't just a recording. It was his exact tone, his specific way of shortening his sentences, and that slight rasp he gets in his throat when he's tired. It was a perfect, terrifying duplicate. "Who are you?" Ben yelled, his voice cracking as he clutched the kitchen knife. "It's me, Ben," the voice replied from the other side of the door. It sounded so casual, so normal. "I forgot my charger in the car, and the door locked behind me. Just open up, man. Don't be weird." Ben backed away, his legs shaking. He could hear the gravel on the porch crunching as something moved back and forth. He realized then that the thing outside wasn't just talking, it was practicing. He heard it whisper the word charger over and over, changing the emphasis each time, testing the vowels until it sounded indistinguishable from his own speech. Then the tone shifted, the casualness vanished, the voice became deep, guttural, and distorted, yet it still carried the echo of his own voice. "Open the door, Ben." The handle of the door began to jiggle, slowly at first, then violently, as if someone or something was throwing their entire weight against it. Ben fled to the bedroom, locked the door, and pushed the heavy dresser against it. He spent the rest of the night in the closet, praying for dawn. Ben didn't wait for the sun to fully clear the mountains. As soon as the first gray light of dawn touched the tops of the trees, he threw his laptop and a few clothes into his bag and sprinted for his car. He didn't even stop to lock the cabin door. As he was speeding down the long, bumpy driveway, he saw Mr. Miller standing by the mailbox at the intersection with the main road. Miller didn't wave, and he didn't look surprised to see Ben fleeing in the middle of the week. He just stood there, lean and grim, pointing a trembling finger back toward the cabin. Ben looked in his rearview mirror, and what he saw is the reason he hasn't been the same since. Standing on the porch of the cabin was a figure. It was wearing Ben's exact blue flannel shirt, the same one Ben was currently wearing. The figure was tall, but its proportions were subtly wrong. Its limbs were slightly too long, its elbows bending at angles that looked physically impossible. It didn't have a face, not really. It was just a smooth, pale surface where features should be, like a sculpture that had been abandoned before the artist could finish it. As Ben accelerated onto the main road, the figure didn't chase him. It simply stood there on the porch, raised a hand, and waved, using the exact awkward half-wave that Ben has used his entire life. Ben doesn't rent cabins anymore. He doesn't go to the mountains. In fact, he rarely leaves the city. He lives in a high-rise apartment with 24-hour security and glass doors on every room because he needs to see what's on the other side. But every now and then, in the dead of night, he'll hear a 3-beat knock on his front door, and he knows better than to ask who's there. If you made it this far, you're braver than most. If you enjoyed the story, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe for more nightmares. Trust me, the next one is darker